there's a dirt road, maintenance road along the oil line. And I drove along with them, stopped and said, "See anything strange?" And they looked at me, no. So I went a little bit further, stopped, said, "Look around, you see anything strange?" No. Then look at the sign. It's half in Arabic, which is what they speak in Sudan. The other half's in Chinese. The Chinese are providing the technicians to the Sudanese government to get the oil out of the ground so that they can ship it to China. China is rearming Khartoum with tanks and all in violation of the arms embargo so that Sudan can keep control of the oil fields. Okay? Understand these things are not simplistic problems like people would like them to be. Okay, having said that, open it up to any questions before I overstay my welcome. Yes, sir.
I certainly don't know a lot, but
I don't always either. So.
based on what I've heard before you spoke,
We can't hear the question.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
I think you get it.
Okay.
Is Islam or the governments, the people there, are
Here,
they,
we can pass this around.
I don't know if it's a fair question, but is Islam or the countries there, are they really incapable of or antithetical to, I guess, liberal, the classical liberal, modern conservative principles we kind of hold dear?
The Al-Qaeda and the Islamists, okay, believe that jihad means a fight that is the obligation of every Muslim. That is their interpretation. And the Quran states that it is justified to retake all Arab lands. That's why I showed you those pictures at the beginning. You see what Islam controlled at one time? If you were an Islamist, you would be taught and believe that it is perfectly acceptable to do anything in those territories because those were taken away from you. They were Islamic territories, and it is your duty as a Muslim to go fight to regain those lost territories.
Wasn't it somebody else's territory first?
They don't. You're mixing apples with oranges. They don't care about that part of it. I've had that discussion many times. Understand, if it was ever once under Islamic control, a jihadist believes it should be returned to Islamic control, and that's his guidance from the Quran. Now, many other Muslims don't share that attitude. But if you're talking about an Islamic society, and if you're talking about places like, because Libya is not Islamic, it is Muslim, but the government is secular. Nobody's going to accuse Gaddafi of being a religious Muslim, except when it came into, just like Saddam was saying, when he needed to, he would always be happy to refer to the Quran or Islam. Okay. Does that help answer your question, or not? Are they not capable? Turkey is a good example of a country that is predominantly Islamic, but is modern.
that they're a secular government, at least
Yes.
up till now?
Now, are there questions and are there times when it vacillates back and forth, going one direction or another? Yes, it is. But Turkey works. Albania is predominantly a Muslim country, but it is not Islamist. In fact, in Kosovo and in Bosnia, when the Islamists joined in to help the Muslims in those areas and started doing some of their nasty stuff, the locals said, hey, cut that stuff out or leave. They weren't buying into the cutting off the heads and the rest of that stuff. So, yes, the answer to your question is yes, there is the potential. Lebanon. Lebanon is a teetering country right now. But then again, so are half the rest of the countries in that. I know a lot of Shia in Lebanon who do not want to live under Hezbollah.
But they won't speak up, will they?
Well, you get if you don't have some cover, you get assassinated.
Right.
So yeah, there is a minor problem there. Eventually, the Lebanese army is going to have to take on Hezbollah in Lebanon because you can't have two armies in one country. But in my work with the the Lebanese, one of the slides I had, there's a picture of solder on it early on. They had talked about insurgencies. And I had that picture on a slide, and it was easy for me to pick out who the Hezbollah officers were, because they got all pissed off that I had him classified as an insurgent, because he's a hero to them. The rest of the Lebanese officers had no problem with that. In private, they will tell you what has to happen, but in public, they can't. Yes, ma'am.
Being that you've been over there and stuff, if you had a magic wand, how would you like it? Is there any end in sight?
No. I'll tell you what I'm
Her question
afraid of.
was, is there any end in sight? That's a great question, Cheryl.
What I'm afraid is, in Egypt, for example, the fact that they are going to have the election sooner is not good. The only real organized group in Egypt is the Muslim Brotherhood. And they've been very smart. If you go to Egypt and you go to the rural areas, they run food banks, they run clinics, they run all kinds of other welfare programs that the government doesn't run. And so they've co-opted a whole lot of people who believe these are nice guys. In southern Lebanon, you have the same thing with Hezbollah. When, after the 2006 Israeli incursion into southern Lebanon, the government told the people whose houses were destroyed, well, we're going to give you money to rebuild your houses. It'll take about 18 months. Hezbollah walked in with cash out of Iran and said, here's $10,000. Rebuild your house. Who's your best friend? Okay? So understand how these groups work and how it impacts people.
That sounds like Chicago will have to do practice.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Why are the liberals in our government favoring Islam?
Because they're
From a
stupid.
Muslim president, that's.
Well, I'm not going to go there as far as the president and all. Understand something. If you don't believe in this country and its basic goodness, and you have the world view that America has interfered in all kinds of places and caused all kinds of trouble, then you are going to side with the underdogs. And who are the underdogs? Now, I've had this discussion with many Arabs officers when I was in Kosovo with the UN. My last position with the UN was as the chief of traffic for all of Kosovo, and my deputy was a Jordanian police captain. And he was surprised that an American hired him to be the deputy. And he was even more surprised to hear that I didn't always agree with everything Israel did. And so we had many discussions. And I will tell you that they have been taught in their schools that America is always pro-Israeli and never pro-Arab. That's not true. Those of you who really think that don't know history. We have one gentleman here who knows in 1956, and I've asked this of many Arab officers, which Arab army threw the Israelis out of the Suez Canal in 1956? And the answer is none. When Gamal Abdel Nasser seized and nationalized the Suez Canal from the British in 1956, the British, the French, and the Israelis went in and took the canal. President Eisenhower had the American 500-year yoke of Turkish occupation. But I want you to see this and see the size, how it shrank by the 1880s. Okay, because we get important. The Muslim Brotherhood, founded in 1928. Al-Banna called for the return to an original Islam and followed Islamic reformers like Abdullah and Rida. These two guys lived in the mid to 1800s through the early 1900s. They were jurists, they were writers, they were very much involved, and they basically outlined what I've just said. Islam has started to fall, it has descended, it has been overshadowed by the West and by Western culture. And they preached a return to the basics of Islam because in their mind that's how Islam would regain its previous status. The Muslim Brotherhood is founded in 1928. Now I want you to think about this. How many people here have seen the old movie Lawrence of Arabia? Everybody at some
Real old.
Real old, okay? Well, that's World War I. There's the British operating out of Egypt in World War I. The Ottoman Turkish Empire allied itself with Germany and Austria-Hungary in World War I. The British enlisted the aid through Lawrence of the Bedouin tribes in the Middle East to fight against the Turks, to operate as guerrilla forces, destroy Turkish supply lines to make it easier for the British Army to advance in that theater. They promised the Arabs would have a homeland. They won. Okay? That's 1916, 1917. During that same time, the British and the French made a secret agreement that was not published until after World War I was over. It's called the Beaufort Agreement. And the Beaufort Agreement divided up the Middle East in post-World War I world. France, who did not have troops in the Middle East at the time, because they were busy in France, got what is now Lebanon and Syria. The rest of it went to Britain in the post-war Beaufort Agreement. World War I ends, the Ottoman Turkish Empire is defeated, and subsequently collapses within about 4 years after the end of World War I. So you don't have an Ottoman Turkish Empire anymore. Now you have a breakup of all of these areas. Britain has Palestine as a League of Nations protectorate. It establishes Saudi Arabia. Okay? However, the Bedouin tribes that the British had worked with basically came out of the Sinai and the Jordan area, close to the British headquarters in Cairo. When they founded Saudi Arabia and installed a king, he was a Hashemite, which is not the Bedouin tribes that live in Saudi Arabia. It's a tribe coming out of Jordan. So in order to get the people, the Bedouin tribe that lived in what is now Saudi Arabia, to accept a Hashemite as their leader, the Hashemites had to make an agreement with the Wahhabis, who were a local area and a very fundamentalist group of Islamists. That is why even to this day, you have a very tight tie, you have very conservative religious views by the Saudi government, because they made this agreement to stay in power. So understand those connections. What Bana said is Islam had lost its social dominance because most Muslims had been corrupted by Western influences. The real important part here is that that Sharia law based on the Quran and Sunnah. Sunnah is an Arabic word that means way of doing things. Basically, it is a reference in Islam to the actions of Muhammad during his life. What did he do in a given situation? That's your God. Okay? And so, not only does the Quran dictate their beliefs, but the actions that Muhammad took are the backup to the Quran. Muhammad actually could not read or write. He was illiterate. Everything that's written in the Quran, he dictated to his inner circle, and they wrote it down, and that's what became the Quran. Key here is these laws as passed down by God that should be applied to all parts of life, including the organization of the government and handling of everyday problems. That is the basis of all of the radical Islamist thinking. Now, under Islam, you will quite often hear people say Well, during the golden age of Islam, Christians and Jews lived in different places and they were free to practice their religion. That is true. What they're not telling you is that if you were not